Welcome to episode 9 of my Gatton CNC router build series. Now this may be a long video because we got a lot of work to do in this episode. We're going to install the Xylotech stepper motors. We're going to install the Dumpster CNC couplers. We're going to measure and cut the lead screws and install the Dumpster CNC anti-backlash lead nuts and get the entire drive system ready to hook up to the Xylotech's drive box. Okay, I've got my X-axis motor mounted now, and I'm going to go ahead and measure up the X-axis lead screw. Okay, now if you'll notice, I do not have my lead nut mounted in this lead nut block just yet. I'm going to do my measuring without that lead nut in there. Now, I've also do not have the bearing installed down here in this upright. It's right here. I'm going to do the measuring again without that bearing. Now, because of the layout of my shop, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to bring the carriage all the way down here to this end, bring up my lead screw, push it through this way, then come bring it back and attach it to my coupler. And that's just some gymnastics I have to do because of the layout of my shop. Okay, something to pay attention to here is the factory end of your lead screw. Now, what I've done, and I did this on the shoestring budget build as well, was I checked both ends with the coupler, and I found the one that gave me the least resistance when I went to go put that coupler on it. This is the end I'm going to use in my X-axis coupler. When I cut the lead screw, the cut end is going to go in that bearing. And I'm going to do that for the Y-axis on both sides as well. Okay, now let's try to get this in here without giving you nothing more than an excellent shot of my back. Now, I've just got it sitting up here on this lead nut, or coupler rather. Now I'm going to turn my little knob here and let it grab hold and take it up to about the center, and it'll stop. Okay? My lead screw is installed temporarily. Now I'm going to go down to the other end and I'm going to measure it. Now there's probably about 1,000 different tools you can use to cut this lead screw, but since I've already got it out and set up and a brand new blade in it, I think I'm going to go ahead and just use my chop saw. Yeah, right. I may be crazy, but I'm not stupid. That's a little better. Okay, some of you may remember this good old Wilton bullet vise from an earlier video series. If not, I'll put a link and a card right here. Okay, I'm going to use, I've got just a standard 4-inch, now this is a 5-inch angle grinder with a 4-inch cutoff disc on it. Guard is in place until I took them off to show you. I am wearing safety glasses. Now, I'm going to stand off to the back side of it here, but I'm just basically going to cut. When I got the lead screw out, I went ahead and I wrap tape to the inside of that mark. So I want to cut fairly flush to that piece of masking tape here. So let me get my grinder plugged in and I will get to cutting. if you look, you can see I wrapped a little bit of rag around the threads just so they wouldn't get glommed up in the vise here. And we got a nice even cut. And be careful, because this is just a tad warm. But that heat also helps that masking tape come off real easy. That's about what we're looking for. Let's see if that'll focus. That's about what we're looking for. Now, this puppy is seriously hot, so I'm going to go cool it off in some cool water so I can file it without tattooing myself. Try my coupler. And that turns right on. Even though this end is going into the bearing, I'd like it to be as clean as possible because I don't want to booger up the inside bore of the bearing. Okay, I'm going to take a couple seconds to clear up what's become a little bit of a controversy. And that is, some of you know that I have recommended, both on the Facebook groups and in a couple of replies and comments on videos. Buzz off, fly. Thank you so much. Everybody wants to get into the act. Where I have recommended using white lithium grease on the lead screws and on the lead nuts. And folks will give me 100 reasons why they don't want to do that, because it's just going to attract dust all over your lead screws. Well, nobody's talking about coating the entire lead screw in white lithium grease. What I'm talking about doing is putting a little bit of grease on the lead screw to get it into the lead nut. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that right here, right now, before I put it up on the x-axis, because you won't be able to see it once I get it up there. Now, I've already done a couple of lead nuts. I did the z-axis. And I've got a little aerosol can of white lithium grease, the brand doesn't matter. And I'm going to squirt a little bit here on this piece of scrap. I got just a little dab. I'm going to take my lead nut and dip my little finger in here. You see what I got here? See how much grease I have here? I'm just going to go ahead and stick my finger inside here and kind of apply it inside the lead nut. Maybe a little bit more. And take my rag, wipe it off. That's it. That's all I'm talking about doing. Now, when you've already got your CNC assembled and you decide you need to do that, obviously you can't get, unless you take it apart, you can't get the white lithium grease in there. So I suggest to people they take a little dab and put it in front of and behind the lead nut, then run the axis back and forth to get that white lithium grease down into the threads on the lead nut. That's all I'm talking about. That's all you need. We're not talking about coating the whole lead screw with white lithium grease, because yeah, you're right, that will attract dust, that will attract sawdust, and it will make a mess. But you see the quantities I'm talking about now. Okay, in the interest of full disclosure, I went ahead and I took the X motor back off so that I could get this lead screw in through the hole here for the motor, and then thread it, hopefully, into the lead nut and then into the bearing hole. Now let's see how this goes. Oh yeah, there we go. Should be pushing that dowel out any second, and I just heard it drop. There it is. Now I'll put the motor back on. torque this down, install my bearing down at the far end, and the x-axis is done. Okay, now comes a wee bit of backing and forthing. I've got my motor mounted on the motor mount down at the far end of the y-axis. I have it on both sides. I've got my bearing support clamped up here in place, and I've kind of set it sort of to where I've got the same measurement. I know you're looking at my back. From the outside of this angle to the inside of this lead screw. I'm trying to get as close as I can, just visually. I've got that measurement here to here, and I've set this up so I've got roughly the same measurement here to here. Now I'm going to go back to the motor and make that same adjustment, because right now I've got my motor in this way too far, and the lead screw is not meeting up with the coupler. So I'll go back there, and we'll go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, getting it adjusted. I can mark this and cut it off. Okay, the initial test fit looks good. The gantry moves back and forth smoothly, but I still don't have the lead nut in this lead nut block over here on my y-axis on this side. And I've just started the preliminary alignment over on this side. Now, I'm not going to put the lead nuts in until I've got both sides cut to length and aligned as good as I can get them right now. Then I'll go ahead and pull the gantry forward slightly, put the lead nuts in, put these lead screws all the way in, and put the bearings on the end, and firm up my clamping. I'm going to be running these clamps on the motor and bearing mounts for a while, until I can run it back and forth under power, make sure that I'm not binding anywhere, and if I am binding, find that place, fix it, get everything in perfect alignment. Then I'll go ahead and screw these down. But they're going to have clamps on them for a while. Now, you saw me using a torque wrench when I was mounting the X-axis lead screw. I'm going to go ahead and explain it now. And I'm going to demonstrate here on the stepper motor rather than on the lead screw. But let me give you all a little tip here. When you go to tighten and torque your couplers, tighten the coupler onto the lead screw first. Then get that torque down to the proper torque. Go ahead and slide the coupler up onto the stepper motor shaft. Then go ahead and torque it onto the motor shaft. But do the lead screw first. That'll save you a lot of aggravation because there's just no room to get in there and torque them once they're mounted. I've probably positioned the camera so that you can't see it, but there is, let me get another coupler here. There's a slot right here, and what I'm doing is I'm sliding the coupler onto the motor shaft to where I can look in this slot and just see that shaft peek through. So once I get it to where it's supposed to be, a little bit too far there, okay, and just see it peeking through. I'm going to take my 3/32 hex and start tightening these screws. And I'm going to tighten it up till I feel it kind of sort of bottom out. And there went one. And there went the other. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about these couplers slipping on these motors. And I've been emailing back and forth with Tim at Dumpster CNC quite a bit. And he's been hesitant to give a torque value for these screws simply because not many people have a torque wrench small enough to register the torque needed for these screws. And even fewer still have a torque screwdriver that'll measure the torque value for these. But he's done his tests. He went and got a torque screwdriver and he went and got another torque wrench. He's done these tests and he's figured out that the torque range for these is anywhere from 7 to 9 inch-pounds. Now that's not much, but it's more than some folks think. I mean, I was surprised. I tightened these screws down to where I thought they were tight enough. Then I got a torque wrench that would measure the torque value, and I was way off. I was running way too loose. So, if you watch Dave's videos, and you should watch them more than once as you're building along. If you watch Dave's videos, his method is to go back and forth between the two screws on the end that you're tightening at the time. So in this case, I would come along here and snug that up a little bit, then move down to this one, snug it up a little bit, and keep going back and forth. Well, you still do that. That is the way they should be tightened. But as I said before, Tim was finally able to come up with a figure after a lot of testing, and we're looking at anywhere from 7 to 9 inch-pounds. So what I did was I looked at all my torque wrenches and didn't have one that would register that low. My smallest torque wrench was 30 to 150 inch-pounds. So I went out and I found this one. Now it's the deflecting beam type torque wrench, as you can see, but it's 0 to 80 inch-pounds. Now I'll put a link in the description box below for this torque wrench. It's not outrageously expensive. It was less than $30. And I know that there are other areas where I will use this, is the main reason I went ahead and got it. So the other thing you'll need is a 3/32 hex, which I've put on this extension right here. Now, the way this particular torque wrench is graduated, and I'm going to get this up here and see if the camera will focus on it. I don't know. The way this torque wrench is graduated, down here from 0 to 10 inch-pounds, there are 3 graduation lines. Those graduation lines, it's broken up into 2.5 inch-pound increments. So what I want to do is I want to get up here to this third line, but not go over. I don't want to go past that third line. So, using the same method we've used if you didn't have a torque wrench, I'm going to put it in here and I'm going to go ahead and go back and forth little by little. I'm going to do a half a turn here, or excuse me, quarter turn. Then a quarter turn here, and I'm just going to keep going back and forth until I get to that third graduation on this torque wrench. And again, I was very surprised. This is tighter than I would have imagined. Not quite up to that third line yet. Okay, there is 7.5 inch-pounds right there. I'm at that third line. And I'm at at that third line. There we go. About 7.5 inch-pounds. Now I'm going to spin this around, and I don't know if you can even see this. Maybe you can. You can see how far that closed up that coupler. Right there. That's quite a bit, and that's a lot tighter than I would have imagined. 7 to 9 inch-pounds does not sound like much, but it's more than you think. So, that's it from the man who designed and built them. So with all the lead screws cut to length, mounted, and torqued down, major construction on the Gatton CNC is, for all intents and purposes, finished. Of course, we still have to mount the router on it, then we have to fire it up for the first time, but I'm going to save that for another video. Now, I'd like to thank you very much for sticking with me. I know this one was a little bit long. Now, if you got anything at all out of this video, please hit that thumbs up button down there. And if you'd like to follow along with the rest of the build, consider subscribing to my channel. Now, I've put a link in the description to a playlist that lists all of the episodes of this build series. I've also put a link down in the description to Dave Gatton's homepage, where you can go get some information on a Gatton CNC kit of your own. So once again, I'd like to thank you very, very much for watching, and y'all take care.